killed his wife to collect the insurance money. Collymore called his wife shortly before she was killed and the contract killer shortly after the shooting.
Evil exists in this world. Trust no one.
This is the story of Simone Campbell-Collymore, a loving, thoughtful, trusting woman who fell deeply in love and married a conniving con man who then murdered her for insurance money and to be with his mistress full-time. The story takes us to St. Andrew, Jamaica, a populous parish boasting some of the most beautiful homes and wealthiest families, where you will find the famous Bob Marley Museum, Devon House, serving up the best ice cream in the world, the picturesque Emancipation Park just a stone throw away, scenic golf course, the invigorating yet relaxing Mammy River, and a gorgeous view of the Blue Mountain Range. Simone grew up in a loving, nurturing, and supportive household where she enjoyed having fun in the good outdoors, had a keen interest in cooking, and took great pleasure in showing off her cooking skills every chance she got. After graduating Merle Grove High School in 2002, Simone went on to attend Nova Southeastern University and briefly worked at Kaplan Higher Education in 2008, while living in Florida before moving back to Jamaica and starting her own business, Ochen & Company, in 2010. People who knew Simone describe her as thoughtful and genuine with a gentle spirit, very humble and decent with a good heart, always smiling, always positive, a lover of basketball, and very business savvy. And the two most important things to Simone were family and love. In the spring of 2009, while working as a professor at Kaplan Higher Education, Simone met a man by the name of Omar Collymore, who was a student advisor at Kaplan, and the two hit it off. He was 26 years old and she was 23. Within months, they were married in May of 2010, and the couple moved in with Simone's parents, though they had bought their own home in Florida. Omar quickly solidified a place in Simone's family's hearts and became the perfect son-in-law. Simone's dad and Omar were so close they would often wear each other's clothing from time to time. Within a year, they welcomed their first child and daughter, Ochen, and by August 2012, they welcomed their son, Odin. Everything was going great, and Simone could not be more happy. But that wouldn't last. You see, Omar had other plans, and having a loving and supportive family and a happy marriage with Simone wasn't a part of it. He wanted money, more money, and he had the perfect plan to get it. And to speed up the process, he fell in love with a woman he was cheating with, and she didn't want to continue being with a married man. She wanted him all to herself. So Omar began to slack off on the home front. He started finding fault with Simone, saying she was fat, but that was all a front to not be intimate with her and to begin distancing himself from her. And because of this, Omar fell out with Simone's parents and moved away to live at the Forest Ridge apartment complex at Stanley Terrace in Red Hills, St. Andrew. And Simone begged and begged for him to come back home, and he refused. But in December 2017, something happened. Omar had a brilliant idea to have Simone move in with him so he could better orchestrate her murder. So he told her to come and live with him, and without hesitation, Simone went. Omar had a plan from the very beginning to carry out his trademark act, and that is to have his women take out huge insurance policies making him the beneficiary, and then murdering them to get possession of said money. Simone had no idea. She loved hard and she loved deep, and if she made a commitment to something or someone, she was going to see it through. Simone was happy and relieved Omar wanted to restore their marriage, but sadly, that was not the case. As the other woman was letting go of Omar after finding out he was married, Omar was not letting go of her. He was already invested in her, taking her on lavish overseas trips, giving her startup money for a new ice cream business, paying her rent and catering to her every need. But she told Omar she would only get back with him if he is single. Omar later told her he was filing for divorce and that they would be together early in the next year, which was 2018. But Omar was not filing for divorce. He had a better plan. He was going to kill his wife and get the insurance money just as he did a decade before in Florida, USA, and got away with it. And wanting to be with that woman full-time only sped up the process. Meanwhile, Omar was playing Simone big time because he knew she was weak for him, but he only had one goal in mind, and that was to get rid of her. He would constantly check in with her to see what time she was leaving work and what time she would get home, and even asked her multiple times to check on her insurance policies to see if they were up to date, and blatantly asked only a few days before she was murdered if he, Omar Collymore, was still the beneficiary. This was the biggest red flag of all, asking if he's still the beneficiary to her insurance policies when he didn't even want to be with her and had suddenly just decided for them to get back together after months of her begging him to come back. Unfortunately, Simone could not see the huge red flags. She was blinded by love. Here she was with this handsome, charming man to call her husband. She was fully devoted, and she couldn't have fathomed that the love of her life could hurt her in any way, and especially not in the way he took her out. Her guard was fully down, and nothing could have made her see what hit her coming. On January 2nd, 2018, Simone kissed her husband and her 2 children goodbye as she head off to work. She would stop by their children's school and pay their school fee on her way, and would take them to the countryside to hang out after work before the new school term begins. But as she walked outside to the parking area, she noticed her car tire was flat. So she let Omar know and then ordered a cab. She had no idea Omar was the one who punctured her tire the night before to facilitate the sinister plan he had for her that day, and that was the last time she would ever see her children, or her children would ever see her alive again. Later that day, at around 3:30 p.m., Simone spoke with her husband just before leaving work, and again when she was almost home. Omar had already communicated to his head contract killer, Michael, saved in his phone as Chris, to have his hitmen near Simone's home since the night before, and they were becoming frustrated. So now that Simone told him she would be leaving work shortly, he immediately texted Michael to let him know. Michael, who was outside Simone's business place, along with his lookout Dwayne, after seeing the taxi Simone went in, communicated to his subcontracted hitman Jim, who was in the vicinity of Simone's apartment, along with Wade, waiting for the right moment to strike, that the target was on her way in a blue Toyota Corolla. And after speaking with Simone a few minutes later and learned she was almost home, Omar quickly texted Michael again, telling him, "She's pulling up in a taxi now. Do it and done. Do it now." Their last attempt had failed 2 nights prior on New Year's Eve, while Simone was heading to church. Omar had texted Michael imploring him to hurry up. "My wife is in a black Mercedes-Benz going to church in Duhaney Park." And since that didn't pan out, Omar was anxious and impatient, as they have been planning and coordinating for weeks. So as Simone sat there in the taxi approaching her gate, unaware of the impending danger she was in, the hitmen quickly descended on the taxi, hopping off 2 bikes. And before Simone or the driver could decipher what was happening, it was already too late. They pummeled the vehicle, a barrage of bullets penetrating Simone's upper body and the taxi driver as well. And as the window glass shattered and the bullets began to land, Simone screamed in agony, but the driver didn't get a chance to react as the first bullet hit him in his head, killing him. As is the norm with contract killing, they want to ensure their target is dead, so they usually empty their guns on them. Jim, on the driver's side, fired the first few shots on him, and the remaining shots he fired on Simone. As Wade caught up on the passenger side and emptied his bullets on Simone. And as they began to run off, just as the gate opened, one of the men, Jim, turned back, and the other, Wade, followed him in order to grab Simone's bag. Because he remembered that Omar wanted it to look like a robbery, so they had to take something. Meanwhile, Omar was in the complex fixing Simone's car tire that he punctured the night before, and his daughter was by his side witnessing the neighbors running and screaming from the pool area because they heard the gunshots just outside their gate, which was very unfamiliar to them. Unfamiliar because they live in a gated community in a very safe neighborhood, and hearing gunshots is a never-happening phenomenon. Until now. About a minute after the shooting and commotion at the gate, Omar called Michael to find out if Simone was dead. Michael told him he'll get back to him shortly. But Omar was anxious to know, so within 3 minutes he called again and got the same response. You see, Michael was not on the scene of the murder, and he was waiting to hear from his hitmen if the hit was successful, but Omar wasn't privy to that. He then went outside looking all shaken up and frantic, crying when he saw Simone gasping for air, bloody but breathing. He then lifted her up and placed her in the police vehicle, then got in with Simone as they rushed off to the Kingston Public Hospital. The police could hear him asking her repeatedly, "Who was the man you were with?" and telling her, "Please don't die." Autopsy later revealed Simone was shot a total of 19 times in her chest and abdomen, causing her to die within minutes from the injuries to her right lung, liver, and right kidney. And the taxi driver, 36-year-old Winston Walters, was shot a total of 5 times, with the bullet to his head causing his instant death. It was later revealed in court there were over 2,000 phone communications between the men. And in just 1 month, from early December 2017 to early January 2018, Omar initiated contact with his contract killer Michael Adams 1,095 times, while Michael initiated contact with Omar 797 times. This is how hard they were working at coming up with the perfect plan and time to murder Simone. And many of those calls and texts were made within minutes of Omar speaking with Simone. And that's how he was able to seamlessly accomplish his goal in the end, because Simone still loved and trusted him in spite of him leaving her, and his subsequent long hesitation to get back with her. Imagine updating your beloved husband with all your daily movements, only for him to turn around and give that information to the person he was setting up to kill you. Cold-blooded. Omar orchestrated the perfect plan, even puncturing Simone's car tire the night before to ensure she takes a taxi in order for the murder to look more like a robbery than a targeted hit. But it backfired. His hitmen were sloppy, and thankfully they were. After shooting up the taxi and running away, the men turned back to get Simone's handbag so it could look like a robbery as Omar wanted. But the bag had Simone's phone in it, and they took it to where they were staying. And that's how authorities were able to zero in on them very quickly. And with surveillance from outside Simone's apartment, they were able to see the murder in full action. And since Wade's face was visible on the CCTV footage, he had no choice but to confess to the murder when authorities questioned him. He was later offered a lesser sentence if he would tell them exactly what happened and pinpoint the other people involved, and then testify against them. And that's exactly what Wade did. You see, Wade did not want to be a part of the hit in the first place. But because his brother, who was in jail, owed the area Don Jim for a gun police had confiscated from him, Jim, the second shooter in the video, told Wade he had to do the hit with him in order to repay his brother's debt. Wade also testified in court that on the day he was introduced to Omar by Michael as the trigger man for the job, he asked Omar why he wanted to kill his wife. And Omar refused to answer and instead just gave him a look. So as you can imagine, Wade must have been happy to testify against Omar. And after Wade exposed Omar as the mastermind, detectives were able to check his phone records, which linked him to Michael and the rest of the men, connecting all the dots and making it easier to solve. Through voice notes, text messages, and the confession and testimony of their star witness and contract killer, Wade Blackwood, the prosecution was able to prove their case beyond a reasonable shadow of a doubt that Omar orchestrated his wife Simone's murder, and the hitman carried it out. So 41-year-old Omar Collymore was found guilty on May 15, 2024, in the conspiracy to murder of his wife, 32-year-old Simone Campbell-Collymore, and the taxi driver, 36-year-old Winston Walters. And he has been sentenced to life in prison with 46.5 years served before parole eligibility. His contract killer, 33-year-old Michael Adams, and his co-conspirator and lookout, Dwayne Pink, were also sentenced to life in prison. And Michael will serve 42.5 years before parole eligibility, while Dwayne will serve 32.5 years before parole eligibility. The second co-conspirator, Shaquille Edwards, was only found guilty of conspiracy to murder and sentenced to 1 year in prison, as he had withdrawn from the murder plot before anyone was murdered. And of course, 27-year-old Wade Blackwood, the third co-conspirator, an actual shooter who confessed to the murder and became the prosecution's star witness, was already sentenced in March 2021 to life in prison, with 35 years served before parole eligibility. However, after agreeing to testify against the other men in 2024, his sentence was reduced to 20 years before parole eligibility. Jim, the area Don, subcontracted killer and shooter, was later killed by police in an unrelated incident. Omar was a selfish, cold, and heartless man. While his 2 children and Simone's other family members were at her funeral mourning her death, he was at the airport boarding a plane to go back home, as he refers to the U.S. But thankfully, authorities were able to catch him and remand him in custody then. And on the last day of his trial, in their closing argument, the prosecution read him like a book to the jury for lying and being fake. Who signs an application for an insurance policy in July of 2017 in 6 different places and says, "I don't know anything about even my insurance policy." That is disgraceful. The insurance agent said this was not an everyday run-of-the-mill policy. It was a massive policy, and more importantly, it was identical to his wife's policy. You, the members of the jury, became acquainted with Simone Campbell-Collymore during this trial through the varying voice notes and text messages. Do you, for one moment, think that Simone never discussed the details of her policy with her husband? Do you, for one moment, think that the manager who came here never discussed the details with Mr. Collymore? Do you think, for one moment, that Mr. Collymore was being truthful when he said he knew nothing about the policy? And using scripture, the prosecutor likened Omar Collymore to a wicked man who was trying to flee a situation even when no one pursued him. Who boards a plane on January 27, 2018, the day of their wife's funeral. I asked Mr. Collymore if he knew it was the day of his wife's funeral, and he had the gall to say no, he did not. This is your dear wife, who you say you are her protector. You said, "I love her dearly." Even when people break up and divorce, you know the day of your ex-wife's funeral, especially when they have children. I asked you where you were going, and the answer, ladies and gentlemen, was profound. He said, "I was going home." The day your wife lay in a casket, and your 8-year-old and 5-year-old were there to mourn her death, where is home? Where could home be? What Omar Collymore orchestrated, engineered on January 2, 2018, in Jamaica land we love, he thought he could slip away. Members of the jury, who gives evidence for 2.5 days in the witness box, speaking about their wife they love dearly and manufacture 5 sniffs, and then, with the drama presentation, sought to wipe something from the corner of their eyes. If that is not fake, I don't know what is. She continued. December 2017 was a very important month. It was the month that Simone moved out of her parents' house to go and live with Omar at 5 Stanley Terrace. You mean to tell me that Simone didn't even live out a proper month alive in your company and under your care? And isn't it ironic that on the 2nd of January 2018 at 2:30 a.m., Mr. Collymore said that he came from parties and noticed that his wife's tire was flat? When has it ever been that you and your mother both have a flat tire on your Benz one night after the other? I found it interesting, and maybe you do too. Who is examining a vehicle at 2:30 a.m. to discover a tire that miraculously is flat? Ladies and members of the jury, 13 hours later, at the same time that his wife was being shot at the gate, he's fixing this tire. You are not fixing it at 9 a.m., 10 a.m., 11 a.m. Is it ironic, coincidental, or is it deliberate? For years, U.S. authorities had suspected that Omar was the culprit in the murder of his girlfriend Angela Aguiar in 2008, after she was gunned down shortly after taking out a $1 million life insurance policy and naming Omar and her 17-year-old son Elijah as the beneficiaries. But authorities, as well as the insurance company, were skeptical of Omar and refused to hand him over the money. But after Omar sued the insurance company, they gave him $400,000 and the remaining $600,000 to her son. Now, a decade later, Omar Collymore has decided to do the same thing again, because it worked out so well for him back then. But like Everton Beachy Stout McDonald, he wasn't so lucky this time. And now U.S. authorities have reopened that case and he will definitely be facing those charges. Simone's horrific death has devastated her family, especially her mom, dad, and children. And as her mom testified in court, her then 8-year-old, now 14-year-old daughter has not taken it very well and even blames herself for her mom's death. My husband and I are really traumatized, not to mention her kids. Her son is now suffering with alopecia. My son also is suffering from depression. He was in the U.S. Air Force and they had to discharge him due to trauma. Her son Odin doesn't show any emotion, but we know that he's hurting emotionally. They've been doing counseling once a week from 2 times a week. Her daughter Ochin, she sometimes blames herself because she saw things and didn't say anything. In the sense of, at one point she said she was in her dad's car when someone called and it was on the Bluetooth, and the person asked for the license plate information and her dad gave it to them. When her mom came home that day, she saw the license plate and realized it was her mommy's license plate her dad had given to the caller. I asked her why she didn't tell her mother, and she said her mom would have rebuked her for listening to big people conversation. So very sad. Now her story will have to be that her dad killed her mom. After waiting over 6 years for justice, justice has finally been served.
Sweet moment for the Campbell family wearing blue in memory of their slain daughter Simone. This is moments after a 7-member jury panel found Omar Collymore guilty of orchestrating his wife's murder.
It's a special birthday gift. As usual, my daughter always delivers on my birthday. And I said the last birthday, my gift was an iPhone.
The verdict was handed down at 1:26 Wednesday afternoon to a quiet courtroom. The foreman delivered the unanimous verdicts. Collymore, the contracted killer, Michael Adams, and Dwayne Pink were found guilty of 2 counts each of murder and conspiracy to murder. Shaquilla Edwards was found guilty for conspiracy to murder, but not guilty of murder. During the 4-month trial, the prosecution presented evidence to show that Collymore hired Adams to kill his wife and that Edwards and Pink played a role in surveilling the businesswoman's movements before her death. A taxi driver, Winston Walters, was also killed. While noting that the verdict will not heal the family's pain, the deceased woman's father said it is a testament that the justice system works.
In Jamaica, the way things set up, people don't trust the justice system. But I can stand here as a witness and say to people that if you give the justice system a chance, it can work and it will work. You understand? I must congratulate the police again. There's a lot of persons that are involved. I can't call everybody's name, but I want to say thanks to the JCF. And especially to Sergeant Huntley.
He also commended the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. Mr. Campbell said it was painful to see Collymore on the stand slandering his family. Simone's mother, Karen Campbell, said the convicted murderer was like a son to her and that they lived happily together. But Mrs. Campbell says she has forgiven the shooter, Wade Blackwood. Among the evidence presented during the trial was that Collymore was the sole beneficiary of his wife's $21 million life insurance policy and was allotted 70% of her second life insurance policy worth $80 million. Prosecutors argued he killed his wife to collect the insurance money. Phone data evidence submitted by the Crown also showed that there was continuous communication between Collymore and Adams in the days leading up to his wife's murder. The data showed that Collymore called his wife shortly before she was killed and the contract killer shortly after the shooting.
Omar, who was born in Barbados but became a citizen of the U.S. and Jamaica, was very greedy. He already had money and he has successful business going. He could have filed for divorce and be on his merry way to the woman he apparently was in love with. He did not need to kill his wife if all he wanted was to be with his mistress full time, but he wanted more. He wanted the mistress, but he also wanted a portion of Simone's 100 million Jamaican dollars life insurance money, of which he was partial beneficiary, along with their 2 children. So Omar, Best, Collymore, got what he deserved, and he will never be able to deceive and murder any other woman ever again. His mother named him best, but he turned out to be the worst. One can only imagine the terror Simone experienced as she was ambushed and the pain she felt as those 19 bullets penetrated her body. But the one good thing that has come from this horrible and horrendous tragedy is that Angela and her family will finally be able to get justice too. She was shot and killed on a Fort Lauderdale street at 3:30 a.m. on June 30, 2008, as she and Omar was on their way to a downtown bar to meet friends. She was 38 years old and Omar was 25. Omar was always a suspect in her death, but authorities were not able to link him to her murder. He seemingly got away, so he thought he would do it again. May Simone's precious soul rest in peace, and may her family find the strength to continue on living while remembering the amazing person she was. And may the taxi driver Winston's precious soul rest in peace, and may his family find the strength and courage to continue believing that there is still some good left in this world. What would you have done if your husband, the man you are deeply in love with, broke up with you and refused to come back to you in spite of you begging him for months? Yet he kept asking about your insurance policies and your daily plans. Think about it, then share in the comments. And please like, share, and subscribe for more videos. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, stay safe out there. And remember, trust no one.
When we went to play basketball the first time, she's like, "Don't play me soft, Like, what? And like she started talking smack and stuff on the court, and I'm like, what is going on? And ever since then, she's just a really warm person. She's like, you hardly meet people in the world today, and that's really good, and the world is so evil. And Simone is one of those people that always just push love, and it's just so real. And she would like, if she had both her legs and somebody lost both theirs, she would cut off hers and give it to that person. That's just the type of person she was. And, the bigger thing behind this for me is just, reminding everybody that life is so short and to always stay together, because that was one thing that she always preached, is family and love, So she's greatly